Hello, Angela.
Hi, Julie.
Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm so excited.
Me too, even though, these topics are difficult. Today we have Angela McCullough, and she's in my authors program with me. She's finished her first draft of her manuscript, and she's in her pre-sale, as am I. Even though my whole book is already done, I'm off track with the program. And she's going to tell you about her book later. But we sort of have this trauma bonding over you writing a book and getting the publishing funded. But today we're going to talk about her identity loss and her forced identity transition, because we are in 2023, and in 2004, Angela was in her early 30s and had breast cancer. And that's all I know about the story. And so, Angela, thank you for coming on, and thank you for surviving and being here to tell the story. I have no idea how it all happened. So let's just jump into it and hear what happened, hear how it changed you, because I know that life-threatening diagnoses, what they do is they put people into mortality motivation, and they see the world differently. So I'm curious to see, did that happen to you? And let's just hear your story. I'll stop judging or presuming.
It is wonderful to be here. So thank you for allowing me to join on your podcast and talk to your listeners, and just to talk about my story. So it's 2004, the end of down towards the end of 2004, which should have been a super amazing time in my life. I had just relocated because I got this amazing promotion. And so I relocated from Michigan to Virginia. And hey, I'm living my best life and enjoying this career. And at the time, school was still in. And so my then husband and son didn't travel with me. So I'm there in Virginia, and I'm in, for a while, I was in a hotel. In a hotel. And the previous year, what I should say, before I had moved, I had my regular my regular mammogram, right? And when I had that mammogram, they saw something that they thought was, not right. And they had done, some tests on it. And at the time there was nothing wrong. So, hey, I left, I get this wonderful promotion, relocate. So I'm there. I'd been in a hotel for a while, and finally had moved into a place, and I was getting things set up for my husband and son to join. And I woke up one morning and there was blood on the pillow. Not a whole lot of blood, but just a small amount of blood on the pillow. And I was like, well, what is this? You immediately think on the pillow, your nose is bleeding. Well, in all actuality, it was not my nose. There was a scar that I had on my breast where they had done the test the year before. And for some reason, it was now bleeding. Strange. But I was like, well, it's crazy, because I thought, hey, it's no big deal. I'm talking to my husband on the phone, and I'm like, hey, woke up this morning, I had this blood, and it wasn't my nose. It was actually my breast that was bleeding. And
Wait, but why did they do a test before where they would?
Because because my mammogram had shown some spots.
Oh, okay.
There, and so they had done
a biopsy,
and they had done the aspirator on the breast. But here we are about a year later, and suddenly the area that had been biopsied was bleeding. And I just it was strange, but I didn't expend a whole bunch of energy. But I did happen to mention it to my husband. I said, hey, I got this thing going, it was blood and blah. He said, well, you might want to go to the doctor. Now, mind you, I'm new to Virginia. It's like, I don't know anyone. I've got to figure this out. So anyway, I go and I had these tests, and which it was really crazy. I'm just, ooh, I talked about like 3 different doctors to finally get to somebody who was like, hey, they ran some tests and said, we probably should go in and really biopsy this. By this time, my husband had relocated back to Virginia. And mind you, I'm not thinking anything, right? Because a year before I had the test and there was nothing there. And so I'm like, well, I mean, this is a little strange, but there was no alarm at whatsoever.
Because you had mentioned you don't have any family history of this too.
No family history at all. I'm in my early 30s. I'm in, perfectly great health. So there was no alarm bells going off anywhere. Nothing to worry about, particularly because at the time when you thought about breast cancer, you really were thinking of that it was something that an older woman deals with, not someone in their early 30s. And so I decide, so I finally get to this doctor who's like, hey, they did some more testing, if you will. And he said, hey, I think we should go in. There's something there. I could feel something actually there. To be safe, let's go in and remove it. By this time, my husband had relocated to Virginia. So this was over like a couple months to getting to that point. And so I go in, I have the surgery.
So hold on. So when this doctor says, hey, there's something there, that's often a time when we start like seeing things differently. Did you start to like, what was your thinking about your life and your future? Did anything enter yet?
Not yet, because again, I had felt something previously the year before. So I'm
Okay.
still hanging on to this year before.
Okay.
And they had done tests, and I'm like, well, there was nothing there last year. And so again, I'm just like, well, we'll go ahead and see what's going on, but it was nothing last year. And of course, I'm a person of faith, and I was like, I'm going to do this because I need to do it, but I just don't believe that it's anything. And so
Okay.
there was nothing triggering at this point until I go into surgery and I come out of surgery. And I'm looking at my husband, who is looking a little, he was very concerned. His whole facial expression. And I'm like,
Because the doctors had talked to him before they talked to you?
they didn't give him all the details, but they said enough to him that he was very concerned. So I come to, and so the doctor is talking to me. And at that point, the doctor said, I can't say for sure until we actually put it under the microscope, until we actually test. But looking at it, I basically removed what looked to be a cancerous tumor, or as they would have said, malignant, looked to be malignant. He said, but I think I got it all. I went around the margins just to make sure that I got the whole thing out. That's when I first of all, complete disbelief. How could this be? And by the way, he said it was a fairly sizable tumor. And I'm like, well, I was just, right? This is where I was. I was just with, and how could this be? So at this point, yes, at this point, it became, what in the world? How did this happen? It was just a year ago. All of a sudden now, this sizable tumor. So now I'm bleeding. And one of the first things I thought about was my son.
Mm-hmm.
I have an only child. And I just immediately, everything became about breast cancer and the fact how many people don't survive breast cancer. Suddenly I was afraid, right? I'm petrified.
Okay, so tell me what petrified is like.
Petrified for me was oh my gosh, if I don't survive, who is going to take care of my child? Will he be okay? How does he survive without his mother? These are the first sets of thoughts that were really going through my mind. How am I going to tell him? What are the words that I'm going to say to him that are an accurate representation or accurate to what is going on, but in a way that he can understand? And then how can I reassure him? So it really,
How old is he then?
at the time he was, man, was he in the second grade?
Little boy.
Yeah. So he is
But
young.
old enough to know that something really, really tragic is
Something is going
in
on.
the air.
Yes, something is going on. And this also became the time where it really became the reflection of, here's where I am and what am I doing in my life? Because by the way, I just relocated for my career and I left my husband and son home in Michigan where I could take this really amazing opportunity to have this fulfilling career. And now all of a sudden I'm in a situation where I'm dealing with a potentially life-threatening disease. Like I can die and we're no longer with family. So I left all the family behind. Parents, sisters, all of that were still left in Michigan. And here we are in Virginia with no family support around, and I am dealing with this particular diagnosis. So I remember, that even that call, that conversation as I was telling my son about this diagnosis and that I was, but that I was in good hands, that I, had the best care that was available and that I was going to do everything that I was supposed to do, follow the directions and that I would be okay. And we had at the time found a church home. And so there was that connection, right? And even in the moment of dealing with this potentially life-ending disease, this, I think, deeper spiritual connection. And that goes to the heart of when we talk about identity and understanding who we are and how we connect in the world. That was a time for me dealing with that life altering, with that disease, that I was really becoming a seeker of truth in a different way.
And how did the church and the faith impact that, or what did it offer?
It offered the belief of healing, the deeply held belief of healing, and that I could indeed be completely healed, that this didn't have to be a disease that killed me, that yes, you can follow what the doctors prescribe and the medication, but that there's also biblical medication. There
There's
are
other
words in the Bible.
forces, there's other invisible forces that you can tap into, or they arrive when you ask, or how does that work?
Yes, and so how it worked for me is I had a great deal of books around me that really talked about healing scriptures. And what I would do is, much like medicine, like if you're ingesting medicine, I was taking the scriptures in through the reading, through praying, right? And I knew, just because I'm a person of faith, and I had seen and experienced in other people and just even in my life, I knew that I could be healed. But I was just open and knowing, right? Where you just have this sense of knowing that even though I was afraid, I knew I was going to be okay. And it wasn't that, anyone, it wasn't like God spoke to me or that type of, it was a peace that comes from knowing that I have been healed in other situations. I have been, and others have been healed. So why can't I be healed? Like, why
Right.
can I not be fully free from disease, whole in my being? And that experience was an experience that drew me closer into my spiritual life, and even closer into a relationship with Christ. The church very much rallied around me. And when I say rallied, it was the prayers, right? It was the uplift. It was that whole experience gave me hope about humanity again. And what I mean by that is that so much of what we get inundated with is so negative, and you just believe that nobody likes each other, that everything is miserable. And you forget that in humanity, that people can just have human kindness, that there are people who can just support you for the sake of supporting you and want nothing, nothing in return. And so that reaffirmed and gave me a different kind of belief in humans.
Wow, that is so powerful. So in my book, I have these 8 principles of mastering change when the rug's pulled out from under you. And one of the chapters is support. And it comes in like many different forms. And I've heard, and there's different stories in my book about people who have had faith, and even, messages direct from God. And there's just so much out there that science is never going to prove.
Right.
And yet there are these forces that people tap into, and how wonderful that you had that, and that I think also, so I'm not a religious person, so I'm like sort of a complete outsider to understand how it all works.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the African American community is like very faith-based in general, and that so it's not that hard to like find a community. So you moved and you found a community,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like essential in so many people's lives, even when you don't have a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do, it's just so amazing the power that can come from that. In fact, I just like had this pickup conversation at the coffee shop with this man on Sunday, and he had like come from the church across the street, and he overheard me talking about the lack of connection, because I like moved from Berkeley, California to Kansas. Like, who does that? Well, that's a long story. And I was just saying, I have no regrets. And it's like people here are in this little place where I am, Lawrence, Kansas, which actually is like it's a neon blue bubble in a sea of red. But even in other parts, it's just like the Midwest people are a little different. They're just like a little more able to like connect than. And anyway, so then he was just telling me about how he, this church, and he's like been to different churches, that this one was so great because they were so welcoming and so supportive. And just, anyway, not trying to go off on a sales pitch for churches, but it is interesting to me because, like I say, I am such an outsider to hear how faith and these communities can be such a strong force in people's lives.
It was, and it probably one of the few times, even in my adult life. I mean, I was raised that way, and then you move away from it. And even though at this point in my life, I'm not a regular attender into a building, a church building, if you will, but the faith that I have and the belief that I have is there. And it's ever present. And that experience, though, was a turning point in terms of reflection. Again, I'm separated from family and I'm chasing this career, right? And because that was important to me, because who doesn't want to have a fulfilling career, and you want to, move to the next level, and that's what was required for me to do. But in those spaces in my work career where I am managing and leading people, that is a responsibility that I take very seriously. And so I go through this, I took a year off to go through all of the treatments. I had full radiation and chemotherapy. And I
Yeah, the
got,
surgery and then those other ones. Yeah.
yep. And then it became the full on everything to go through the treatment, if you will, for um, for breast cancer. And I get to the end of this year. Now, mind you, I'm in this space with this belief, knowing full well that I was going to be okay. I seized the moment because I've always been this career woman, career mother, to actually take time. And I used to, when I had the strength, walk to the bus stop with my son, be at the bus stop to pick him up. And I got to engage differently with him because I was not running out to this career because I had to be in the office for this meeting and all this type of stuff. And that was a wonderful experience to parent differently, because now I was in the house all day when I, wasn't in treatment and all of that. I was in the house, and there was no like aftercare type of situation because I was home, and that allowed me to experience him differently. And I will always remember that challenging time also created positive memories when I think about my son and, days that I was weak and he would plop in the bed and we'd play Uno, right? And these always these wonderful memories of connection. And the fact that if you ask him, he probably was like, hey, mom said she's going to be okay. She's got good care. The church is surrounding us. I mean, the overwhelming outpouring of humanity, people bringing food to the house and sweets and little gifts and games. And there was such love in what could have been a very, really lonely time. But it made me start doing a lot of reflection as I was going through this time, and started thinking about what is important, and having that connection with my son differently than I had ever had. I started asking myself some questions about, what do I value? What's important
What
to
were
me?
those questions?
Number one, what is important to me? Here, given this, now you are facing what could be death. You survive. What's going to be important to you? What will be different in your life? Because I would tell you, all of a sudden, some things just didn't seem to really matter anymore. Like that
So
whole
what are
career
what are
climbing.
the top three things that didn't matter anymore, and the top three that popped up to the top of the list that weren't there before?
Well, number one, the whole career climbing suddenly just really didn't seem that important anymore. The second thing and then the thing that seemed the most important was really my family, and really spending time and really connecting with them. What didn't matter, the second thing that didn't matter anymore is, man, things that I suddenly was like, was I really spending a whole, did I have energy around that? Things that just, things that we so oftentimes get caught up in, that I was like, I don't really care if it's not having a direct impact on me, people I love, my potential life, health, and all that. It's inconsequential. And I started reflecting and realizing that maybe I spent a lot of time having emotion about things that, when you get right down to it, aren't really that important in life anymore. What mattered now was living, and how I lived, and who I connected with in that journey. And I realized that I had been so focused on driven in this career, that there were some things that had gone by the wayside. I really hadn't always done the kind of investing that I should have done in friends, people that have been there. So you had the family, and then the friends that had been with me along the way. And so I realized I needed to spend more time building building those relationships. And here's a story when I say that I just really didn't care about a lot of things. And one of my sisters said, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute, maybe you've gone too far. You just, there is no, you don't care." I mean, and it may have, but in that moment, it was just like I shedded everything that was not really about loving on my family, being in my own like healthy body, mindset, my spiritual life, the friends that I had in my life. If it was outside of those things, I was like, yeah, it'll be okay. I'll get to it. It suddenly, and I am a type personality. I am
You're a
driven.
success woman. Your high
Okay.
performance,
We get
ambition.
we get things done. We work hard, we deliver, we follow up, true to our word. Like, all of those types of things are really my personality. But I really had to reflect and just say, how is that serving me today? Because one thing I do believe about disease, dis-ease, is that sometimes disease is a manifestation of other things that are going on in your life, other places where maybe you're not being truthful, other places where you're biting your tongue when you really need to say, and those things end up bottled up in you. I believe that. I don't care what science says. But I think if we look really closely, we'll find a lot of people who are dealing with, some physical maladies that sometimes can come from what's going on in the mind. And so I did a lot of started doing some reading about that. And so suddenly now the part of me wanted to really understand Eastern traditions. So it made me a seeker of a different type of truth, and starting to ask a different series of questions. In that moment, I researched whether or not I even wanted to do chemotherapy and radiation, or whether or not there was some Eastern traditions that maybe I want to do. I opted for the traditional because they said it was a fairly aggressive growing cancer. Because remember, I had nothing just the year before, and now I had this 3 centimeter tumor that they had removed, and they said it was a stage 3 already. And so I was like, well, maybe I should just follow this. But yeah, so seeking a different type of truth, and that was different also. The identity change is because, as you kind of said, you talk about African American community and tend to be a fairly religious type of community. And what a lot of people maybe don't understand, a lot of what we would say, quote unquote, traditional mindsets, in that people don't understand, because we tend to have a lot of democratic hats on. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of kind of traditional and conservative type of thinking in the Black community, but I also started questioning and really becoming a seeker of understanding for my own self, as opposed to what and how maybe we were taught, and what was in the house. And one thing that I said, which is sort of how I ended up on this podcast is because going through this experience and getting to the other side, and that belief in humanity again, differently, I should say, I knew I wanted to reach out and connect with other humans, right? That I wanted to share message, that I wanted to encourage, and I wanted to uplift. And that was really that pivotal moment of going through that experience and being a recipient of so much love and encouragement and hope, that I was like, it's my way of paying it forward, if you will. And
Hmm.
I survived. And since that time, I've been breast cancer free. I had a little scare in the middle of the pandemic that sort of
What a
it
horrible time
taught
to have a
me
little
a
scare, but
little
oh my
scare,
God.
but it was nothing, very thankfully, but I was like, but when I had that scare, I said, okay, am I doing things that I said that I would do? And I am. I have now, I still ended up on my career trajectory because, like you just said, like sometimes we just are who we are. However, I took other people with me, on my journey. I
You did
uplift,
it differently than you would have.
yep, I
You did
uplift
it with a
other.
certain a lens of what humanity can be versus what you had experienced it and whatever you'd been taught
Mhm. And
before.
even what the world says. I mean, because the world is very clear about how we support or don't support, or the world is clear about what success looks like. And I was like on that path to kind of what the world says success looks like. And as I pivoted into this who I became, I still wanted to be successful, but I decided that I got to define it for myself. And anyone who knows me knows I say all the time, yeah, you can't name me. I decide what I'm going to be called. Okay. I decide what success looks like for my own self, and you don't get to do that for me. But what I did make sure that I've done and will continue to do as long as I draw breath is share what I know with others. It is, if it's opening a door for someone in terms of their career, if it's carving out time to listen and be encouraging. And in those moments, I want people in that moment, I want them to know and understand that I care. And that in that moment, I'm 100% committed to what it is that they're saying and sharing whatever I can, whatever I've learned on my journey that might be helpful. That's really how I try to live my life now.
So you added, it sounds like you added this major piece of contribution. So Brendan Burchard has a book, what's it called? Charge, I think is that one. Anyway, it's like these 10 things that human beings, I'm so bad, I should know these words, things. These 10 things that human beings, this part of being human and feeling fulfilled and feeling engaged and happy. And one of them is having a way to contribute. And it sounds like you just like sort of put that on steroids, whereas before it was more about, and people who are high achievers, they get that way because they pay attention to themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you sort of added this other layer. You shifted how you became, the type of leader that you were.
Mhm. Yes, I would definitely say that would be accurate. And somebody gave me a really great compliment that said, um, the gentleman was retiring, so he was on his way out, and he said to me that I have a very unique ability to care about the mission and to care about people at the same time. I think that's critical. We work because we've got to deliver on something, but I'm always cognizant that the delivery happens with and through people. And so you can't have one at the expense of the other. So how do you balance that human connection and human engagement, right? And so I think that's really what it became, with along with a whole even stronger dose of don't ask Angela McCullough if you don't want the truth. So I mean, I was always that individual, but
Know your truth, speak your truth, live your truth.
yes, became very, very comfortable at being able to do that. Not, but I was doing it in trying to do it in life affirming ways, not destroying people and tearing people down, but sharing the truth in a way that still affirms them and hopefully gives them some some foundation, right? Or a jumping off point if they want to do something different. So yeah, so that also became on steroids, because I was like, yeah, I am alive and I have an opinion, and I jokingly laugh with people and say, well, I tell you when I have an opinion and when I have an informed opinion. Sometimes I just have opinions, but
Oh, that is
other times
good.
I have an informed opinion, and I like to, share that with people. Yeah.
Oh, that is good. I've never heard that. Opinion and informed opinion. Oh my
Uh-huh.
goodness.
Yep.
I was going to ask something else, and then you said that. Well, let's see. So the hour is running down or up. Who knows what is? And oh, I know. Hold on just a sec. Let me remember what I was going to ask. I can't remember. Well, let's just skip that. And let me ask you. Lost it. So one of the things I like to ask people on these interviews is, what was your identity like before you had cancer? Your identity where you were living through, I might not make it, like you're facing your mortality, and your identity now that you have come out the other side and have this, I'm going to stop putting words in your mouth, but basically different perspective.
So, so before cancer, I, people would always say, and I know it to be true, I was always still a truth teller. I was, in retrospect, I realized I was driving myself because I just didn't want to be categorized the way society tends to categorize. So my mother was a single mother. My father died when I was young, and I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. And so society and statistics would have said that I would have been another statistic that's, unwed Black mother, if you will. And I was just determined I was going to outlive any of those types of stereotypes. And when I reflect, there was a lot of that was driving, that was really driving me to, have this career, not be this statistic, to be a quote unquote success in the way that America defines success. And that's what I was doing. I mean, I was raising my son and, being a mother and teaching him and positioning him and preparing him, because it was important for him to be an individual in society, an individual that we want to be in society, right? Within the community, I wanted him to be community minded and all of that. And I had my friends and I had my life and I had family, but I was so career focused. And, so I was career focused and I was finishing college and I was this mother and I was a wife, and I was driven, I knew where I was going, and things or people that didn't necessarily fit into that, I didn't always carve out the time that I needed to. It was people that I loved. I just was on this path, and that's where I was focused.
Well, and just to give you a break, there's only so much one person can do when they're a mom and they're a student, they're working towards their career, they have a husband. It's like there's you can't do everything we want.
I know, but
You are not a stay-at-home mom that can just have all these coffee dates. Not that stay-at-home moms aren't busy like heck. But
I would rather go to work than, because their job is like 24/7. But
right.
and so then I get into, I'm in this cancer, and I'm trying to figure out, first of all, why me? Why me? I'm in my early 30s. There is no family. Why is it that I am diagnosed with this? What is going on? So there was that whole why me type of thing. One of the things that helped me with why me really became a spiritual question. Like, why not you? If you were a follower of Jesus, I mean, they nailed him in the cross. If that is your faith, they he had thorns. You know what I'm saying? The ultimate. And I thought, well, okay, he died on the cross for everything, then why not me, right? So it became originally it was a woe is me, like, oh, I'm sick, that kind of, well, what's wrong with me? Why did I get it? And all of that. And then it became, well, okay, but if this could happen to him, then this could happen to you, and you could survive it, right? And it could be okay. So that was going through that whole, I was doing voracious amounts of reading, was trying to understand, and I was having a lot moments of quiet prayer time. I wish I could say I was meditating, but my sister can't meditate. I try to meditate and go to sleep, but I do believe that it was a time in my life that helped with spiritual connection and some clarity in my life while I was going through it. And then, of course, being this other mother now I wasn't cooking and cleaning because I was weak. And, but on days that I was up and felt good, I was, at the bus stop, and hey, we're going to play cards in the bed. And oh, by the way, Wegmans cookies are the best thing going. Food tasted horrible, but sweet Wegmans cookies tasted amazing. And so I'm sitting in the bed with my son, and we're eating cookies, right? No-nos. So I got to experience that type of different connection, with him during that. And then as I was getting through the end of it, I'd gotten through the end of it, I went back to work. This was 2005 when I had gone back to work, like March, April of 2005. And you know how I said this responsibility I feel leading people is something I take very seriously. Like, you're in the charge over people. And I was weak and tired, and I didn't have myself to give to the work in the way and the people that I gave it to. And I made a decision that what was important to me was me and my own health and my family. And I wanted to go home. I wanted to go back to Michigan and be where my parents were, and to reconstruct my life, if you will. And I made the decision to step down. So I just go over there and pretty much spend just over a year or a year and a half there, most of which I was in treatment for what should have been an amazing career opportunity, only to decide, I can't do this. My heart isn't here. I don't have it to give. I need something very different. And I need to go home, because for me, home is always source. You can always, I believe, go back home and get energy and reconnection and love and clarity. And I went back and was very intentional on those connections. It was still hard because I was more focused. I was focused on the connections and the relationships and the love, but I just didn't have a bunch of time and energy for like idle what I was saying. Like, why do you care what that politician said? I no longer, right? And I like politics. So things that, where you're watching the news and you're screaming at the TV because the politician's an idiot and oh, okay. That's just what they said. I just have no energy because I said, it's not serving me. And as I reflected and said, I lived through this, I have these experiences. And that was really the time when I started really talking about how do I want a human connection and how do I give and share? And so that became the journey to where I am now, right? The time along the way, I finished undergrad, I went on to grad school. I started getting itchy though, because I was like, I'm ready to get back to managing people because there's a joy that I have in that and really collaborating like that and engaging like that. So I went back into that. I went back into that work, but it was different, right? I went back into leading people, but it was different because now I was a lot more open to the connection of the people that work for me differently than I was, and a lot more open to really helping them get ahead and helping them get clear on what they wanted in their life, and even more clear about giving, feedback and all of these things that I believe that as a person leading and managing people that are in your charge is what you have responsibility to do. And I really seize that. And I think that it actually has served me well, not because I didn't do it with the intention of this is going to help me get ahead. I did it with the intention of this is the right thing to do and I'm called to it and I want to do it. But I think people saw that and they recognized it and they appreciated that ability to step in and to lead people.
Mm-hmm. Well, another chapter in my book is purpose. And so when people have the rug pulled out from under them, they end up like, maybe they didn't have like purpose so clear before, but boy, coming out the other end, you have some real clarity around purpose and really what it, like you've been talking about this whole hour, what's important, what's not important. And it's not that politics and what people say aren't important. It's just like, in my day right now, to like support my health and happiness, what's going to serve me? And I need to be served. I need to protect what's going to serve me, so then I can go out in the world and implement on my purpose.
Yes, that's beautiful. I love the way that you said that. That's absolutely it. It wasn't like I didn't care. It was just like, why am I going to expend a whole bunch of energy over that? Energy that I'm expending over there means I don't have energy for other things that matter, that really have
that you can
meaning.
do something about. Yep. Yeah,
absolutely.
So because I had that happen, there was this family crisis, and I just stopped listening to the news because I wasn't going to be doing anything about anything right then. And the more I listen, and if I listened to the news, then I would get depressed, and then I couldn't allow that. I had to keep my head above water. And so, and even after all that, I very selectively, it's not, I want to be informed, but I just have to be selective. It's like I have to titrate it, because I can still get depressed. It's super easy to get depressed. And then it's just like, why bother? What's the point?
Right.
And that's not going to serve humanity. And that then, makes me like, well, anyway, so sounds like we're sort of on the same track as far as like, well, we need to serve ourselves so that we can serve others.
Yes. We
And
need to
so,
normalize that.
so what is your book about, and what is your message, and what is your mission? I know you're still like working, and at the same time you got this little side gig going on. So
Yes, thank you so
tell
much.
everybody what it's about, where they can find you online, how they can support you, things like that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Like many women, I work in a very male dominated, particularly white male dominated. There's just not a lot of representation across the spectrum. And in a lot of my work,
Wait, wait, hold on. Does this have anything to do with systemic racism?
No,
Like maybe it might exist?
it might exist. I'm all about women power, all period. I'm just women power. And what I recognize, particularly when you talk about women of color, there's just another set of challenges that exist there. And so, my book, the working title, it could change, but from margins to mainstream, how women of color are redefining public sector leadership. And so I have this really crazy idea that many of our policies are tone deaf simply because they're not written by the collective, right? And we need change. We need change in our urban and rural communities where there's poverty. And so there are food deserts, not access to health care, housing. We could just go on and on and on. And some of that is because the American public, the policymakers are not tuned in to writing policies that can have positive impact to those unserved and underserved communities. So my book is actually, it is a career guide, and it's founded on this idea. I interviewed women across the spectrum that work in the public sector, whether it's fire, police, higher education, federal government, to understand how did they do it? Like, how did you deal with the systemic racism, the barriers that exist? How did you get to the top? And what can we learn? And so the book is all about different, the importance of how to live authentically, and what does it mean to have a strong sense of self, and why it's important to actually network, which is something particularly women of color, they don't network. And so it is all of their stories or unique things that these various women did that we can learn from them. And then how do we apply them, right? So I tried to get a broad spectrum of individuals, and it's an opportunity to amplify their story and to shout out their story, because after all, these are individuals, including myself, that are paid by the American taxpayer. Our jobs matter because we're delivering a service that the public is expecting us to deliver. And so it's a career guide, but the idea is we need to get more women of color into these key senior leadership positions where they can have impact on policy so that we then can impact the communities, right? And so the book really is a tool, and that I believe, of starting a social justice movement where we can leave these communities in better places than they are today. And so that is that's my idea. And so you can find me in a few places. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn at Angela McCullough. You can find me on Facebook, the Angela McCullough Community. And I'm actually on Instagram, and all of my titles don't line up, and I'm working on that, but I'm Angela Lifestylist on Instagram. And so if you are a person who also believes that we need some changes in our communities, I love for people to follow along and to connect. It'd be wonderful.
All right. And how can they buy your book? I know it's in pre-sale, which means it's not actually published yet. How much longer can they support your pre-sale to actually fund publishing versus later when you launch it and you can just like buy it on Amazon or wherever?
Right. Thank you so much. Right now, and I don't know when this podcast is going live, but I have another 7 days. So it's up until I guess the 14th. June the 14th, and it is on all of my social media platforms. I am talking about this. I am talking about this book. If you go to my Instagram, it's actually the link in my Instagram post where you could grab it. And I'm posting about it on my other social media sites where they can grab it in pre-sale and actually join the community to really help ensure that this is an amazing book that really helps women get to the top, and more importantly, increases the numbers so that we can then have impact in our communities.
And so Angela, unlike myself, she is going to be doing the revisions, and there's still time to be a beta reader and give her input of like, this is great, you know, what about this? This is missing. That's what we as authors in this great program that we have, there's still time. So even maybe if you don't get in the funding for the pre-sale, you can still get in touch with Angela if the topic is of interest to you, and read like the introduction, some of the chapters, be a beta reader. We're not asking you to be a copy editor to talk about grammar and all that kind of stuff. It's just like about the content ideas. And that's the way these books are. They're actually community written books because we get this input. And so how many weeks do you have to do for the revisions?
I actually have a good long, like 4 months.
Okay, so you're going to have the show notes, how to get in touch with Angela. And I urge anybody who this topic resonates with you to get in touch with her and be part of her beta readers, because I've already been through all this. So my book is like going towards the printing press as we speak. Yes. But it was the beta readers who got me through it, and it was like told me that the book needed to be finished. This is hard to be, this is a tough program. Yes. So this is just my plug to support Angela as you know, a beta reader. So important. And obviously this topic is so important because, you know, however we think, we live in a diverse world, and everybody's viewpoint has validity. And so much, at least in this country, the United States, is very like heavily weighted in this one sort of viewpoint, like the white male. That's sort of like what's been in power for a long time. And you know, Angela's helping other women of color, Black, all different colors other than white. And white women can get something from it too, right? Yes. Yeah, it's like we're not excluding. Yeah. But it's just like you're like starting a movement. So let's help Angela with this movement.
Oh, Julie Brown, thank you so much. Wonderful interview, and just reflecting and talking about it, and hoping that it's helpful, you know, that your listeners, you know, get something out of my experience. But it was great having the opportunity to share it, and wonderful of you to even allow me to talk about the book and to even plug it as well. So no one goes it alone. And that is the one thing I will say. And even in the book, in the last chapter, there have been some white women, white men, Black men that have been very instrumental in being allies and mentors and supporters. And I interviewed them to hear their stories because they've opened doors and helped in immeasurable ways. And I never want those stories to be lost either. So we're all in this together. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be on your platform.
Well, it's my pleasure. And, you know, if this breast cancer journey hadn't happened, we wouldn't be talking today. I'm not saying you wouldn't be doing great things. I am saying that these kind of experiences impact people in good ways. You know, these things that are so uninvited. So we so wish that we couldn't have them. And then at the same time, we can like become masters of change, which of course is my book.
Yes,
And I just, it's just like hearing your stories, like, okay, that I can see that like all these principles of change, courage, changing your, make sure you have a growth mindset, like changing your productivity. You changed, you know, what became, you stopped working, you know, and then you like, the productivity was around taking care of yourself during that time. And then later on, you know, you became, your productivity shifted too, because your purpose shifted. And then what else? Support. So like, and then clarity, you became like instantly, no, I don't know how instant, but you became so clear of what's important, what's not important. So like my book is like clarity and focus, purpose, courage, mindset, support, self-care. So that's 6, and I'm missing 2 more. I can't remember right off the top. I should remember. But yeah, I mean, it's just like when you're talking and when I do these interviews, it's so exciting to see how sort of predictable these things are. Because like as a social worker, I know you got to get off real quick, but as a social, I was a medical social worker. And so like I talk to people with a lot of problems. And so they're in crisis, and you can either like spiral down in a crisis, or you can spiral up. And it's like your choice, your mindset. We don't have control. Like maybe you were going to die, maybe you weren't going to die. You know, we don't, that like some things are like, we do what we can do. And there's so much choice, and you just made all of these choices that you know, you weren't making before you got sick.
right.
And that now is driving you in this much more inclusive and, I don't know, I would say powerful direction than just like the career woman success story.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about it like you just described it. So I really can't wait to
Hear what
read.
I just said?
And yet that sums it up. Sums it up.
Well, good. I wish I could sum up my show notes that easily, but anyway.
Well, I'm gonna look for something to help you with that.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. Any last, okay, give us 2 takeaways before we hang up.
2 takeaways. Number 1, be open. Open to experiences, to people, open to life. That was one of the biggest things, moving past, well, I don't do that and I don't do that, and embracing more. Okay, yes, I'll try it. It's new. It's
Curious, yeah.
yes. Be very curious. And one thing I always try to do is leave whatever I am doing better than it was before I started doing it. In the case of working in environments, can I have a positive impact is what it comes down to. And I think we all need to kind of reflect on having a positive impact. You don't have to be bold and have a positive impact in the world, but have a positive impact in the world that you live in.
We each one of us matters. Each one can make our own impact. You know, I'm not going to become the president of anything, but it doesn't mean, so it's not like the labels, it's not like how much impact, but just know that you do matter and you can make your impact. And the world is like, that's why you're here, right?
I agree. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon.
This has been Julie Brown on Bold Becoming.